Reverse Selector is an essential component for any dashboard developer who is incorporating what-if analysis into their dashboard designs. The power of Reverse Selector is not only its ability to take one value from a single value component and distribute it among a range, but also its ability to perform what we call a reverse lookup. And that is a loop that is not possible with out-of-the-box Excelsius functionality. Upon installing Reverse Selector inside of Excelsius, it's made available in the Other folder within the Components window. After dragging and dropping Reverse Selector onto the canvas, you're provided with 4 simple properties that will allow you to configure Reverse Selector functionality. The first thing that we need to define is our source value. The source value is going to be linked to the same cell as our input component. In this case, our input component is a slider. So the slider is inputting values into cell B2. So we're going to link our source value to cell B2. Now we need to dictate where the value inputted from the slider will be distributed. In this case, we have a state with 50 independent variables that we want to control. So our destination range is going to be one cell for every state within our map. So this tells Reverse Selector to distribute the values from the slider into this destination range. Now what we need to do is tell Reverse Selector which cell it will insert the value from the slider into. And for that we use either a row or column index. In this case, we want to define the row number for which we're going to insert our value. So row 1 would be Alabama, 2 Arizona, 3 Arkansas, and so on. So our row index is going to be linked to a single cell. So as the value in D4 changes, it will allow Reverse Selector to distribute the value from the slider into the appropriate row. As you change a row index, it will also need to change the value within the slider. So in other words, as I move from Alabama to Arkansas, we want the slider to represent the 8800. We don't want to overwrite that 8800. And that's really where the power of the reverse lookup comes into play. If you go to the Behavior tab, by default, Source Value Lookup is checked off. Source Value Lookup essentially creates a loop where when you change the row index, it will go to the current row index, grab the value, and place it into, in this case, B2, which is our source value. And then from then on out, it is then B2 that controls our value. The other thing that we need to identify is our behavior. So there's different triggers that dictate when Reverse Selector will execute. You have several options. You can tell Reverse Selector to trigger when the source data or row column index changes, when only the source value changes, or when the destination index changes. We find that most of the time the first selection is adequate. So in this case we say when the source data or cell B2 changes, or when the row or column index changes, in other words D4. So as I move the slider or as I click on the map, which affects our row index, that will trigger Reverse Selector to execute. So when we go into preview, as I change from Alabama to California, Reverse Selector will pull the value, the current value from California, put it into the slider. Now as I change the slider, it will change the value for California. So when I go to Texas, it will look up the value in Texas, allow me to change it. But if I go back to California, it will recall my previously modified value from the slider, place it back so that I can then move forward and modify my value for California. So you can see that Reverse Selector provides powerful functionality that's not possible out of the box with Excelsius for building more robust calculator applications without the extended overhead of multiple sliders or cumbersome logic.